Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Southfield City Council, June 20th at 6 p.m. Madam Deputy Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilwoman Banks.
Present.
Councilman Brightwell.
Here.
Councilman Cruz.
Present.
Councilman Frazier.
Here.
Councilwoman Hogue. Here. Council President Mandelbaum.
Present.
And Council President Pro Tem Taylor.
Here.
Council President, we have a quorum.
Can you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up on our agenda is our communications. The Southfield City Council has established the following rules of procedure for all speakers. No speaker may make personal or impertinent attacks upon any officer, employee, or city council member or other elected official that is unrelated to the manner in which the officer, employee, or city council member or other elected official performs his or her duties. No person shall use abusive or threatening language towards any individual when addressing the city council. Any person who violates this section shall be directed by the presiding officer to be orderly and silent. If a person addressing the council refuses to become silent when so directed, such person may be deemed by the presiding officer to have committed a breach of the peace by disrupting and impeding the orderly conduct of the public meeting of the city council, and may be ordered by the presiding officer to leave the meeting. If the person refuses to leave as directed, the presiding officer may direct any law enforcement officer who is present to escort the violator from the meeting. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. First speaker is Jay Reed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Happy Juneteenth to everyone, as well as happy Father's Day to all the fathers, dads, and mentors in the city of Southfield. My name is Jay Reed, and I'd just like to make a public announcement regarding the 2023 election. The people of Southfield, including myself, will continue to fight hard to protect our democracy and ensure that the elected positions stay elected and not appointed. This also reflects what type of city we are building for our community. One city that's truly the center of it all, or a city that cannot sustain itself and has to rely on appointed positions created for persons outside the city borders, leading to the question, why can't we operate day-to-day business with Southfield-led leadership? Also, to show my support in that effort and to have our city succeed, I am announcing my withdrawal from the clerk's campaign for this year and will be endorsing candidate Janet Jackson, and I do hope that each person here will follow suit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Paul Messerson. Did I say that correctly? Messeron.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My concerns clearly go to the question of wild animals. And I must tell you, I don't know whether you saw the newspaper article today about in Livonia, they had a major meeting in which they're dealing with coyotes and deer. And it's important that we look at all of this because, you know, the deer do not know the border between 8 Mile and Southfield or in Livonia, but also deer don't know it either way, nor do the turkeys. Now, how did I get involved in this? It's very simple. Some people are feeding the deer, but they're also feeding the turkeys. And when the deer finish eating, they leave what all is left, and the turkeys are eating them. are eating the remaining part of it. 2 weeks ago, I got chased from my mailbox to my back door porch by 2 of these turkeys who were very angry. I didn't done anything to them, but what they're angry about is this is their territory at this point in time, and the females are nesting, and the males are there to defend that territory. And they don't quit. You can yell at them, you can scream at them, you can throw things at them, but they don't leave, and they won't quit. Now, so there ought to be a law that says you can't feed wild animals, and that you are fined if you are feeding wild animals. Feeding deer, or feeding turkeys, or feeding coyotes. I haven't seen too many coyotes. I've only seen 2 since we've been there 31 years on Hunter's Lane. Now on Hunter's Lane, these same 2 guys, these 2 turkeys, chased joggers down the street on Hunter's Lane. They chased and surrounded a UPS driver, and that UPS driver had great difficulty delivering his package and packages. These turkeys peck at cars. And in some cases, some people say, chip the paint on the cars, but.
Sir, your time is up. If you have a last-minute thought, we'll
Sure.
let you.
I think what you need to do is establish some penalties for people who are feeding these animals.
So, thank you. I know we do have an ordinance about feeding deer, and we will have, in a few minutes, a presentation from our Wildlife Commission. And I know they're in the chairperson's in the audience, and I'm sure he'll be interested in hearing some of your thoughts as well, and I think he's taken note. Thank you. Next is Greg Keeler.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I noticed that today agenda has on their ordinance for resisting arrest. And so me and my friend were looking last month at one person that was being arrested. And the question crossed my mind, if a person with disability is told about 6 or 7 different orders, they're not going to follow them. They're going to be confused as to what to do, where to do, and what is it that they actually want. Next off, some of the orders that they're asking them to do and they want them to move in a fast motion, that's not going to happen. So are they going to end up being shot because they're assumed to be resisting arrest? And then the other thing is, which one wise man told me that's sitting here in this audience, is that there are a bunch of people walking around with disabilities that you have no idea of. So invisible disabilities you don't know about. So I would, be just a little bit weary as you get ready to possibly say yes. But disabilities people, this could be a problem with them. And just following the orders that they might just be moving a little bit slower than expected.
Thank you. Right. Next, we move into the presentation portion of our agenda, and prior to the wildlife presentation. We have one added presentation from Dawn Williams from Love Word Incorporated Christ Ministries. So if you want to come up to the podium.
Is this okay here?
Yes,
Okay. Good
You can
evening, everyone.
you could adjust the mic.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dawn Williams, and I am from Love World Incorporated, Christ Embassy Ministries. And we're having a campaign, as you can see my shirt, it says Reach Out World. And so we're reaching out to businessmen and those that are in higher positions, and also mayors in the surrounding Detroit and also Detroit. And we are commemorating them on behalf of their duties and what they've done for the community, for the people, for the cities. And so on behalf of our ministry, we would like to just present you, sir, with a gift. Here it has our daily devotion. It has a pen with your name imprinted on it, a plaque also, and we have a book. It's called Power of the Mind. And so we just want to say thank you, sir, for all that you've done thus far in office. And yes, sir. So I would like to know if I could get a picture, if it's okay, please.
John, do you mind taking a picture for them?
This is a total surprise. So thank you very much. It's always nice to be appreciated. We all work many times without people noting everything that we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to present this presentation to the mayor. And God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we will have our Wildlife Commission annual report.
Hello. Sounds like the mic's good. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today, and happy Juneteenth to all of you. I hope you enjoyed the holiday. My name is David Schaefer. I know most of you by now, but I am the chairperson for the city's Wildlife Commission. We've been working since, the beginning of 2021, after you decided to form the commission back in 2020. And we're here to present our second annual report to you. Third full annual report. The first one was very truncated. But my plan tonight really is just to kind of go over a little bit of the commission's work, highlight some of what we've gotten done, some of the challenges we've faced, and what our initial recommendations are for the council. And then I'm also going to cover just some of the data and background we have on kind of the elephant in the room, which tends to be deer, because that's what was the impetus for the formation of this commission largely. There's a lot of wildlife issues, but so just kind of by way of background, wildlife isn't something everyone thinks of as a problem or a concern in suburban areas, but it is a growing concern in many communities, including our own. People have noticed over the last decade a lot more deer, coyote, turkey, and other animals in Southfield that they weren't used to seeing. Some of that might be due to our own success in improving the environment, and some of it is probably due to urban sprawl and more habitat getting removed. So there's a lot of factors here, but we've got a lot of wildlife in the city. Our commission's been around since it was formed in 2020, but we didn't start meeting until 2021 when we had a full body. And the mission you gave us was to develop and propose to the council a wildlife program within the city to ensure the safety, health, and welfare of residents and visitors in the city of Southfield and of the wild animals within the city of Southfield. I just want to stress that initially, because even though we focused a lot on deer over the last couple of years, the mission you gave the commission was much broader than deer, and it was to look at a wildlife program within the city. And a lot of the commissioners took that seriously and have really tried to take a multidisciplinary approach to this, thinking not just in terms of residential problems or concerns, but also ecology and biology as well. So So what have we been doing? So we've been meeting since 2021 in January. We do have public meetings. They're open to the public, just like the city council meetings. As I will note later, public participation in those meetings tends to be pretty low, so that's a little bit of a challenge. Until this last year, the city was also performing an annual deer survey, an aerial survey using a helicopter that had been going on before the commission was even formed. That was discontinued this year. I'll get into that a little bit more later. But we do have pretty good data on just estimates of what the deer population looks like. We don't have the same type of data for a lot of the other wildlife in the city. We've been working with a lot of local elected officials, both in the city and other communities as well, and we did perform an online survey in 2021 that got about 226 responses from residents. There was a lot of different questions in there, but there was broad support for the city being more active, generally speaking, in terms of wildlife management and wildlife control. A lot of support for more education, habitat restoration, addressing coyotes, and increasing signage. People were a lot more split about what to do with deer in particular. Most people want the city to be more active when it comes to deer, but residents are pretty split over what that means to them and whether that includes killing deer or finding other non-lethal solutions to deal with it. So. Also in 2021, we helped the city develop a no feed the deer or don't feed the deer ordinance. So that is in effect now. That's ordinance 1748. That one applies specifically to deer. I did hear Mr. Massarone's comments earlier. We do have another ordinance in section 216 of the code it's really dealing with feeding rodents and varmints, but that one's a little bit broader to where if people are improperly feeding, say, wild birds or chickens, with the wrong equipment, code enforcement could potentially look at it. But we can certainly look into expanding some of those if needed. So, and then we did do some town halls and advisory ballot questions too in the last year. So one thing we put on the ballot was an advisory question just to try and gauge residential support for a deer cull. So removing deer with lethal population control, donating the meat using a third party. That got 61.7% of the vote back in November 2022, which is a pretty impressive number, especially considering it was an off-term election year, so it wasn't a big presidential election year. We had pretty high turnout in Southfield. Before that vote, we also did a town hall meeting, which is something I'm going to come back to more. But we actually got the city to work with us and do a promoted town hall event that just focused on deer issues, and basically brought in a few experts to answer, to present information and then do Q&A sessions with residents. And we had about 150 people that showed up for that and were very engaged in the presentation, which was stark contrast to just our general public meetings, which people don't tend to hear about or don't tend to come to. So what I learned from that was that for things involving wildlife and deer, if we really want to communicate with residents, we probably need to do some targeted messaging and make sure we get the word out. So general challenges. Some of these won't be new to you, given that you're all elected officials and you know what some of these challenges look like already. But one that we faced was getting input from residents. You know, being a public body, having public meetings, having a lot of rules that we can follow isn't always the most conducive to getting people to take times out of their evenings while they're trying to eat dinner and come talk with us. So during the last 2.5 years, we've only had one resident show up at one of our public meetings. I've gotten a few informal communications, like people like Paul, who have managed to get to me by calling a number of other people at the city, and eventually I get his contact information. But generally, getting input from residents has been very difficult. So that's one thing we focused on, is increasing public participation and how do we communicate with residents. The fact that deer management and wildlife management is a divisive topic has also been a difficulty, because no matter what you do and what you decide, there's going to be happy people, there's going to be unhappy people. Again, not new to anyone that's in public office. But wildlife management tends to be a particularly divisive subject. And so that's been a big challenge, because people get very heated when they talk about this, and their passions get inflamed, and that can create concerns for maintaining civil discourse and just making sure that people are hearing each other and not just talking at each other. For wildlife management in particular, one challenge has also been the nature of being a public commission. Wildlife management decisions are multidisciplinary. They're going to take into public opinion, science, best practices, things that a lot of people have spent their careers working on. They're not always the decisions that lend themselves the best to a group of volunteers making decisions on a committee basis, because you really need unified action and unified voices on a lot of this, and sometimes those decisions are best made by an expert with the training and expertise to really make an objective recommendation. But our commission has done its best to try and put our own personal thoughts and feelings aside and approach this as objectively as we can. But none of us are experts on that either. You know, I'm a lawyer by trade. During the day, I've got a little bit of education in natural resource management from undergrad. I understand that stuff. We had one other commissioner who was a biologist. She understood a lot of it. But the rest of our commission was made up of people who do not specialize in this field. So it was a lot of new information coming to them right away. Fourth big challenge tends to be just municipal financial constraints for deer management. When people talk about deer management, they often think of population control. There's not a lot of great ways to fund that. There's a ton of free money out there in this country for habitat restoration, environmental repair and restoration work, things like that, even money for game habitat improvement at the state and the federal level. I have not yet located a single grant program that will give you money to help control your deer population or any other wildlife population unless there are disease concerns like chronic wasting disease, and then you might be able to get some money from, say, U.S. Department of Agriculture to control the disease. But that makes it a challenge because anything the city decides to do in this realm is going to have to be paid for out of the general budget, most likely. There's not many ways to really raise revenue to pay for this unless you're going to be charging some kind of fee that could be associated with deer. And then the last challenge is, you know, what we have spent most of our time focusing on deer. The city's put some resources into getting good data on that. But when it comes to other wildlife issues in the city, we don't have good data, and they're not easy to study. You know, we have heard residential concerns about coyotes, and especially during the breeding season when they tend to get more active. We don't really have a way to study coyotes. Without hiring someone to go out and tag and track some of these animals, all we get is anecdotal reports from residents. We have a general idea of some areas where they might be at certain times of the year, but we don't even know how many coyotes are in the city, where they're at, where they're being seen most frequently. And the same can be said about pretty much every other wild animal in the city. Wild animals are difficult to track. It's part of the reason why wildlife research tends to be difficult to perform even at an academic level, because you're constantly trying to get money to do a very labor-intensive effort. So those are just some initial challenges that I think should be brought up as we get into what's going on. But I am going to talk a bit about deer, because deer is really the catalyst here. So a little background information you should know. DNR doesn't have a hard, fast rule on this is too many deer in any given area or environment. They've got kind of varying guidelines that depend on the type of environment you're talking about, and the rule of thumb DNR goes with for suburban environments is 20 animals per square mile. That is considered a sustainable amount in a suburban environment. But that doesn't necessarily mean if you go above that, deer are going to start starving to death right away. We've got lots of gardens, we've got lots of great food for them out here. It doesn't mean if you go below that, your deer population's in trouble. That's just kind of an average general guideline. So keep that in mind. Some other things to keep in mind is that male and female deer do not behave the same way. So we hear lots of people talk about deer not respecting municipal boundaries and really wandering across the line. That is true. They don't respect our political boundaries, but a lot of the wandering tends to be your male deer. The bucks, the male deer, can wander many miles per day, many more miles per day during the breeding season, so that's in the early fall, early to late fall. So male deer can wander as much as 5 miles per day, 20, 30 miles in a week when they're really on the move. So they really do travel everywhere, and they're the ones that can breed with multiple females and really keep the population blowing up. Female deer are a lot more local in their natural activities. So they tend to find a core area where they live and bed down and stick within a couple mile radius of that core area. And as you see some maps later, that's probably why you'll see some clumping in a lot of this aerial survey data that we have, because the animals find an area that's good for them, like something near a water source with plenty of food, and they stick near there. And those areas tend to be places like along the River Rouge corridor, near our golf courses, and in some of our more sprawled neighborhoods with large lots. So we do have good data on deer here in Southfield because we did do the survey for quite a few years. We stopped it this last year because the price almost doubled. It went from $3,000 to $5,000 for our share, and the weather conditions this year weren't great either, but one downside of a survey is you need snow on the ground to be able to do a survey. And even then, most experts say that these surveys are an undercount more often than not, because you can only count the number of animals you can find hoof prints for in the snow and track them down. So you normally don't get everything in your survey area. But even with those limitations, since 2018 through 2022, we pretty consistently saw between 245 and 275 deer within the Southfield area during the survey period, which is February. So in the month of February, there was about that many deer hanging out in the city at any one time. But I do want to call your attention to 2022, where we had a bit of a broader survey area, and you can see that if you even extend that survey area by 1 mile in any one direction, you pick up 200 more animals, just because they really do clump in different areas. They don't respect municipal boundaries. So our population number isn't skyrocketing. It's not decreasing dramatically. We don't really know if it's at an equilibrium yet, but this is a snapshot. So in February, this is kind of a snapshot. That doesn't mean that's where the animals are in the summer or during different time points in the year, but it is more data than most communities have when they start tackling this problem. So I think Southfield should really pat itself on the back for putting some money into this initially to at least get some population estimates. And just by way of reference, our neighbors over in Farmington Hills, they have an average population that's almost double what ours is, that's been observed in February. So a lot of those deer are probably moving. Don't want to beat a horse to death here, but just as a visual representation, these are distribution maps from 2022 and 2021. So you can see that there's definitely some clumping with where the dots are. The dots are, the larger dots mean more than one animal, the smallest dots mean one, but they tend to clump in specific areas. A large amount of the population tends to be west of Telegraph Road and north of 11 Mile Road. But they're starting to move their way further east and into the city more. That being said, a lot of people east of Evergreen or Losser may not see very many deer. So this is a problem of differential impact. Not everyone in the city experiences deer the same way. Second map shows you the same basic information for 2022, just with raw numbers and 1 square mile grid boxes. So remember that number of 20 animals per square mile I mentioned before. If you look at Southfield there in your bottom left quadrant, so between Inkster and 11 Mile and 8 Mile, you can see that there's several areas of the city where we have close to 50 deer per square mile. So for the people living in those areas, there's a lot of deer. And that's more than DNR would recommend too. But we've also got areas in the city, say down in the bottom southeast quadrant, where nobody's seeing any deer. So the deer do not live evenly distributed across the city of Southfield, and that's probably part of the reason for some of the difference in opinion about what to do, because people are experiencing this event differently. They're not all having the same lived experience. So. Deer have cost Southfield some money though too. So like I said, we've been doing the aerial survey since 2018. And we shared those costs with Farmington Hills. We used to pay about $3,000 as our share of the cost. That jumped up to $5,000 in 2022, and it was going to go up even more in 2023 because of the retirement of one of the aircraft, and then just general inflation as well too. So there was a decision made to discontinue the aerial survey for now, at least. That is something we could restart, but right now we've got some good data. Our Public Works Department has been spending a decent amount of money just on roadkill and processing these animals too. So there's a decent number of animals that are hit every year in Southfield or that die naturally. Oftentimes what happens is DPW gets a call asking to have them come picked up from the side of the road. So that results in a work order. It's a couple people going out, usually with a backhoe and a truck, and it costs about an hour of labor for all of that. So it ends up being about $164.87 plus disposal costs and plus the cost of employee benefits. When we tallied up the numbers, the city was spending anywhere from the low 30,000s to upward of $60,000 per year disposing of wildlife, if you take into account the manpower, the benefits, the disposal costs, and the actual removal of the animal. If you take out the kind of the human aspect of that, it was more like $25,000 per year, but it's still a decent chunk of change. And we've also heard some concerns from residents about the fact that there's been difficulties with getting those animals removed if they're on your private property. So DPW's great, happy to pick animals up when they're on the side of a public road, but if they're on the side of your lot, it's It's been a little bit more difficult. We've tried to work with them to make it easier for residents to just get the animals out to the curb, but there's still not great solutions there, and it's something we should probably keep working on. Car accidents are another issue that is oftentimes brought up as a concern when it comes to deer. You may or may not know this, but Oakland County itself has had the highest number of deer-related car crashes in the state for quite a few years now, almost 2,000 in the year 2019. Southfield has had a decent number of reported car crashes, but they have been pretty stagnant. So I pulled 4 years worth of data from trafficcrashfacts.org, which harvests data from public websites here in Michigan. And in those 4 years, we had exactly 50 or 67 accidents in each of the 4 years that were related to deer. Again, probably an undercount because people got to call it in. But just to compare that to drinking and driving related accidents, we had 74 of those in 2021. So we have almost as many deer related crashes as we do drinking related crashes in the city, at least based on what's reported. And then the city, before it even formed the commission, did take a look at the ecology of this too, and had Dr. Jacqueline Courteau come out and do a study on some of our natural areas and parks in 2017 and 2018. I won't bore you with all the details of her report, but basically what she found was evidence of pretty heavy overbrowsing in pretty much all of our parks. And that's largely deer and rabbits, but she was saying a lot of it's deer. And she was looking at the types of plants that were being overbrowsed, and the concern raised by her study was that a lot of the native species that we would like to see growing in our parks, like trillium and a few of the other native wildflowers that are great for pollinators, those are the ones the deer really target. They like them, they eat those, they don't eat as many of the invasive species that tend to push them out. So not something deer control is going to manage right away, but if you did do it, then you could work with restoring the habitat in the parks as well over time by trying to get out some of the herbivores and then helping ease the native plants back in. But it's going to have to be a holistic approach if that's a goal. So I want to talk just about deer management options, and I'll go through these pretty quick because there's a lot of text up there. So one is just to do nothing, or basically kind of the approach the city has taken. So let nature take its course, which is an option a lot of people advocate for. You know, there's certainly some merit to this. It doesn't cost the city any money directly. It is a hands-off type of thing. And eventually, the wild population will reach some point of equilibrium to where you won't see more deer coming in, you won't really see a ton of deer going out. What that means in reality, though, is that you'll end up with animals starving to death, because that's what natural equilibrium means in terms of a wildlife population, is that you reach a point where the environment can no longer sustain any more animals. Another problem with that is most likely our residents have a much lower tolerance for the animals than the ecosystem does. And so chances are you're going to hear a lot more angry residents before we get to the point of natural equilibrium. Another option is trap and relocate. It's something people propose a lot. So why can't you just catch the deer and move them somewhere else? The simplest answer is that it's not legal to do in Michigan. MDNR will not approve that. There's disease concerns, there's regulatory concerns, there's cost concerns with it, but the short answer is that we can't legally do it, even if we wanted to. So I'm not going to dwell on that option. Predator reintroduction is another option that I'm not going to spend much time on. You know, areas like Yellowstone National Park have had a lot of success managing their deer and elk population by reintroducing wolves. We're not Yellowstone National Park. We are a city, we've got residents living here, we've got a limited number of green space. People already get concerned about seeing coyotes in their backyard. Nobody's going to want to reintroduce wolves or more coyotes or something like that in the city, even if we thought it was a good idea. So not going to spend much time on that. It's probably not a legal option either. The next option would be just normal hunting. So some residents have expressed some concern with this. We've got and some interest in it. We've got a group of residents that have approached the city about possibly having local hunters go out and take a couple deer each year if it would help out with the efforts. There's a couple ways you could do that. What I'm talking about right now is just the normal in-season hunting that DNR manages. That's probably not an option for Southfield because our current ordinances don't allow firearms or bows to be discharged within the city. We don't have anywhere within the city that's approved for hunting generally, so even our parks and green spaces aren't approved for it. So there's really not anywhere anyone could hunt during a normal hunting season within Southfield, even if we wanted to authorize it. And the commission was of the view that because of safety concerns with hunting generally, we probably wouldn't want to recommend a in-season normal hunt, because that's really just any of your neighbors who have a tag and a license and a basic firearm safety course going out and taking whatever deer they have a tag for on public property. There's a lot of things that could go wrong with that. So if the city was interested in hunting, we'd propose a more regulated off-season hunt working with DNR on that. So this slide's really kind of where the meat and potatoes of the potential options come. So one would be the out-of-season hunt that I mentioned. You could do this working with local hunters, and basically what happens is that MDNR would work with the city. They'd issue special permits that would allow taking the animals out of season, normally in January or February. There's an application process, a fee process. It's fairly straightforward once you get it all going, and fairly low cost. And then you can either use professionals or you can use hunters to remove the animals. So this would be a hunt or a cull. If you're using hunters, you would basically have the city handle the administration of issuing special permits or tags. We could potentially charge for that to help offset the cost for the city. And then you would need someone probably from the police department kind of monitoring the hunt areas. And what you would do is open up certain city parks, maybe find some private landowners like some of the golf courses, or if some of the churches with larger lots wanted to open up and participate in it, they could allow their property to be used off. You'd have to have lots of notice, lots of signage, some oversight, and then for a few weekends or a few evenings out of the year, you would have people come out and do an archery hunt from a tree stand, aiming downward to remove whatever number of deer they have a tag for. So that's using local hunters. You can do it safely. Every city that I've read about that has done this across the country has never had a single problem with it in terms of safety. It's always worked out really well. The concern I do hear about it from the management side is that it's not the most effective way to do population management. For example, the city of Meridian Township up near East Lansing has done a hybrid sharpshooter and hunter operation for quite a few years now. They've got a lot more rural space that they can use and open up for this than we do. They only take about 30 to 50 animals per year using their normal hunters, which is not enough to have a lasting impact on the population, so they use sharpshooters to harvest another 50 to 100 animals each year. And that's how they offset it. But it is an option that's out there, you know, and it would really be sustained based on residential interest and be able to keep the program going. The easier to administer program, but more expensive program would be to use sharpshooters, and that's what most communities have chosen to do if they've taken on deer management. And there really seems to be two pools of sharpshooters you can really draw from. One is private contractors, like a company called White Buffalo, which is what Ann Arbor used when they did their cull. And another would be to work with U.S. Department of Agriculture and hire some of their trained sharpshooters to come out. USDA does tend to be cheaper from what I've been able to find on a per animal basis. I don't know about the limitations on their contract or what they're willing to do. White Buffalo is a bit more expensive, but they kind of are a full in-house shop to where they will come out, they'll write your management plan for you, they will perform initial surveys if you want on population numbers, perform the hunt, help administer getting rid of the meat, and then they will write a final report and let you know kind of some different metrics so that you can gauge the success of the program and work with you to figure out what those metrics are going to be too. So there's benefits to both programs, you know. It does seem like Ann Arbor had probably the most data to support its results when it did it, and it went with White Buffalo, but it also was spending quite a bit more money. And Meridian Township was able to keep its costs low without using sharpshooters, but they were also using the police department as their sharpshooters instead of professionals. And that's an option that hasn't gained a whole lot of interest in Southfield, is having the police department involved in that. So we're probably left with USDA or professional sharpshooters. There is theoretically the option of, instead of using sharpshooters, to capture the animals and euthanize them using chemicals. I haven't talked to any management professional that recommends that, just because there's a lot of additional costs that go into that, as well as liability concerns and more risk of injury for the professionals working. So they tend to stick with a sharpshooter option if you're going lethal management. And then the other bucket of options that gets thrown around a lot is a non-lethal sterilization form of deer management. So this is basically making it so that the deer cannot reproduce anymore. And there's two ways you can go about doing that. One would be a surgical sterilization, which is similar to getting your dog spayed at the vet. It would just be done in the field. So someone goes out, they shoot a deer with a dart that tranquilizes it, they perform a quick field surgery, similar to with like a dog or a livestock. Sew the animal up, make sure it's doing all right, shoot it full of some antibiotics, wait until it wakes up and let it go. These surgeries tend to be very successful. One community in Michigan that did do it was Ann Arbor, again, for the first couple of years of their cull. They worked with the sterilization until the legislature actually enacted a short-term law that prohibited DNR from issuing permits for sterilization. But during the Ann Arbor program, they reported no fatalities of animals. It was very effective, so each female deer that was sterilized could no longer reproduce. And they saw effectiveness numbers in the study area that did sterilization that were right on par with the lethal population management. And surprisingly, the costs were not as much more as Ann Arbor was expecting. I think they spent about $10,000 more on that study area than they did in their sharpshooter area for a variety of different reasons, but they were expecting the cost to be higher than they were. And then a final option would be, kind of self-help option. So if the city was to decide not to take as much of an active role and leave it more to residents, we would kind of recommend trying to help the residents a bit more. There's lots of things they can do that aren't foolproof, like planting deer-resistant plants, putting in fencing, chemical repellents, changes to how they garden and landscape. The downside of this really is that it does shift the cost of this public problem onto the backs of individual residents, which also means that for our lower income homeowners and tenants in the city, they may not have the resources to really engage in these types of activities, and so they're really not going to have the resources to beautify their properties and protect them from deer in the same way that wealthier residents would be able to. And so that's just kind of an economic disadvantage to leaving everything to the residents. But we could certainly do more with communicating with the residents about that. So, and then before I get to the recommendations, just a little bit more on the cost, because I did mention cost differential. So, sharpshooters. You're looking at $400 to $750 per animal is what the White Buffalo Company estimates based on its current costs. And so that's what we pay to the company to come in and administer the program and remove the animals. That does not include any staff time that the city would have to incur for its own staff persons being involved in this operation. So that's something else you'd have to factor in. But if you're considering that you probably need to remove anywhere from 80 to 120 deer per year for at least a 3 to 4 year period initially, the costs do get up there fairly quick. It's not huge, but we're talking about a per animal cost. If you do a managed hunt, so that's what I'm talking about is the out-of-season hunts I mentioned, where we work with DNR, happen in January and February, but we don't use sharpshooters. Those can generally be done at $200 or $300 per animal, and that would include the permitting fees, the costs of working with DNR, and then hopefully we could lump the staff time into that as well. And then the one thing that's an uncertainty there is that you can potentially offset those costs by selling the permits to residents who want to take a deer and bag a deer on their own. So, and then the final main population control idea is the sterilization or fertility control. And these costs really vary depending on whether you're doing surgical sterilization or chemical contraception. I didn't really talk about chemical contraception before because Michigan doesn't really have many of the chemicals approved in the state, but it's theoretically an option. DNR says there's one out there. This tends to cost anywhere from $900 to $1,500 per animal. So you're getting up into the double the cost range as compared with a sharpshooter option. But the benefit of this is that it does keep the animals alive so that you're not killing any animals. The downside is that it takes longer to see results because you got to wait a couple breeding seasons before you really start to see impacts. So, and then one other thing about the fertility control is I was going to say is that the commission, if we were to go with the fertility control, really prefers the sterilization method over the chemical method for a couple reasons. One, it's one procedure in the lifetime of the animal, so lower impact. And two, since you don't have to retreat or use chemicals at all, there's no need to tag the deer and mark it as unfit for human consumption anymore, because if an animal does get chemicals injected into it for fertility control, DNR no longer deems that safe for human consumption. So you got to throw a tag in its ear, and if someone harvests it later, they can't eat it. So a few things there. So with all that in mind, that's all a lot of background information. There's a lot of information in the report, and I'd be happy to field any questions, but I'm going to go over our general recommendations. So we didn't start with the big ticket item first, because that one was controversial. We started with kind of the low-hanging fruit. So one is communication and transparency. Not a stranger to anyone in public office, but it is a big factor. And there's been a lot of people that have studied wildlife management issues in different communities, and every single one of them has said that if you want a successful program, the best thing you can do is get residents involved early, help them take ownership of it, and keep them involved throughout the entire process. Because there's always going to be people that are upset, but they're a whole lot less upset when they know what's going on and they feel like they have a voice in the process. So I do think our city's done a decent job at getting started on this, in that you did form a wildlife commission. You've got residents on that commission. We've done some town halls. We've done some surveys. We're trying to communicate with residents. We can do better, though. We can do a lot better than what we're doing now. You know, residents have a lot of interest from the surveys we have done in getting more educational material, going to events, just hearing more about this subject. So we've been trying to work with the city to get more information on the city's website for quite some time now. There was a lot of interest in doing that when I met with the subcommittee. There's still nothing on the website, so I need to follow up a little bit, but we need to get more of the information the commission's been able to gather up on the website. We can use places like Ann Arbor, Meridian Township, East Lansing as role models. They've done this already. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but there's a lot more we could be providing online. It would also be very helpful for residents to have a better or more efficient way of communicating with the commission, whether that's an email address they can send stuff to that would then get forwarded to us on a weekly basis, a phone number, or something. But right now, their options are to go to a public meeting or to call whoever their favorite city official is and hope that through a game of telephone, the communications get back to the Wildlife Commission in some way. But there's got to be a better way for them to communicate with us. You know, when I talked to Mr. Masserone a couple weeks ago, the only reason I even heard from him was that because he called several people in the city, and eventually one of them gave me his phone number and I called him back. But had it not been for that game of internal telephone, we never would have known that he was having problems with wild turkeys. And the same can be said about pretty much every other concern we've heard from residents so far. We also would like to just see the city, when we do make this a priority, speak with a unified voice on it, which is why I think having information up on the website would be great. One challenge we ran into around the time of doing the ballot question was that there were several people with different understandings of what information was out there, and so the commission was putting some information about the number of deer in the city out in its official documents that were going out to the public. There were some individuals in the city making statements on their own, and then there was some other information being put out in the newspapers. All three of them had different information, only one of them was correct. And so there's just the risk of confusion when you have things like objective information about the number of deer in the city, but the city is not communicating with a unified voice on it. So we just want to make sure that the city is going to speak with a unified voice on it if it can. So that kind of leads us into our second recommendation. As I hinted at, wildlife management issues are a difficult thing to be decided on a committee level basis, and oftentimes they are done with someone who is a trained professional in the area, either wildlife biology, zoology, or something similar, digging into the data, digging into the science, and then making an objective recommendation that the city either goes with or doesn't go with. But we think there could be a lot of value to the city bringing on a staff person, either full or part-time, that could focus on wildlife and environmental related issues and then split their time with other departments as needed. I'm sure there's plenty of work that Parks and Rec, Public Works, or some of the other departments could find for this individual. But there's a lot of things someone like this could do. You know, they could be a liaison between our commission, the city council, the city administration, and other communities, working more during the 9-to-5 workday when most public officials are getting their work done, and then bringing that stuff back to the commission, who is all volunteers, mostly with day jobs. So we're not answering emails or phone calls for this work oftentimes during the day. A staff person could also kind of serve at the same role that the planning department does for things like the planning commission or the zoning commission, where the priorities and a lot of the hard work and research and reporting is done by someone who's an expert in this area. They bring really well thought out proposals to the commission, and then the commission can debate a bunch of ideas and bring that to the city. But as things have been standing right now, we are really kind of a ship that's been going without a crew. So we have a commission. We've been coming along as best we can, but we've been setting our own agenda, setting our own priorities, trying to find time for the research. And we've taken a lot longer to get to where we are now than we really wanted to. You know, I would just use Ann Arbor as an example again. When they decided to look into going forward with the call, the Ann Arbor City Council told the administration that you had 6 months and a small amount of money to go out, talk with residents, talk with experts, come up with a proposal. The city administration in Ann Arbor made it 1 or 2 persons' jobs to do that, and in less than 6 months, they had already conducted several public surveys, engaged with a whole bunch of experts, and came up with a report very similar to what you're seeing today, recommending that Ann Arbor go forward with a call. And Ann Arbor was able to get the balls rolling on something much faster than we've been able to, in part because of efficiency, through having 1 person assigned to do this job. But a staff person could do more than just manage wildlife issues. They could also be someone that could look into grants for a variety of different projects the city wants to get involved in. If you ever want to do something like habitat restoration as a part of some of your park improvement projects, there's a lot of funds out there with the DNR or with the U.S. Park Service, things like that that you can apply to, but you normally need to have a full project ready to go with your grant proposal. Who's going to write those grants? Well, someone with a background in this could do that. And they could potentially advise if you have issues. I don't think we have a city arborist, but some cities do. I know we've got regulations on what trees can get removed and what can't. So someone with an environmental background could really fill a lot of different roles in this city, not just wildlife, potentially benefit other departments as well. The third recommendation goes back to this idea that you asked us to create a wildlife program, not just to deal with deer as a nuisance species. And we thought that was important and noteworthy. For one, because it aligns with what a lot of the management texts say. There's not a single wildlife manager out there in this country that says that you should approach deer, wolf, coyote, or other wildlife management on just a myopic species approach. We want to get the numbers of this species down to a certain level. That's just not smart management. You need to think more from an ecosystem approach and what are your goals? What is it you're trying to achieve? So if our concerns with deer are not that there's just too many of them, but maybe that landscape damage is increasing, natural plants in our natural areas are decreasing, and invasives are increasing, and car accidents are up. Well, those are goals and metrics you can work towards decreasing. And if one of them includes habitat, so the natural areas in our parks, you can make habitat restoration a priority. And that's something that could be integrated into our sustainability plan for the city, the commission's work, the Park Service's work, and it really could just overlap with a lot of different things we're already doing. But we've already got data from 2017, 2018 showing overbrowsing in our parks. It's probably just gotten worse since then. The problem is that even if we were to remove half of the deer in the city today, those natural plants aren't going to come back on their own. So if we ever want to restore those parks to a more natural native plant environment, we've got to attack the problem of overbrowsing while also dealing with the habitat itself, which could involve having the commission work with Parks and Rec to set up volunteer events for removing invasive species, things like garlic mustard and other stuff that comes back every year. But if you don't get involved in those type of things, then you're really just looking at this as a nuisance problem, and we're really just talking about removing animals for the sake of removing animals. And then the final item is really kind of the big ticket item, is, to cull or not to cull. And I was hoping to have a affirmative recommendation from the commission with a yes or no on this, but there wasn't. In fact, a majority of our commissioners aren't comfortable saying yes or no to cull deer, largely because the consensus is that this is not yet an ecological problem. It's really an individual policy issue and a people problem. Deer are not starving to death in our city. Our citywide average population distribution is well under the recommended numbers. We've got pockets in the city where there is overpopulation. So there are pockets in the city where population control could certainly be justified if that's what the city wants to do. But the question of whether it's a good use of city resources to engage in population control in a few pockets is really a policy decision. It's a financial policy decision. And so that's where the majority of the commissioners were, is that we don't have an answer for you as to yes or no whether to cull the deer, but you do have areas in the city where it would be fully justified if you wanted to. Here's the things to consider with that, though. Population management's a long-term commitment. It's not a one-and-done situation. It's not a three-and-done situation. If the city is going to start managing the deer population, such as killing deer or sterilizing them, this is a long-term commitment the city's going to be engaged in basically in perpetuity or until we decide we're done spending money on it. The reason is that deer reproduce like rabbits. They reproduce at an exponential rate. A female deer can have 2 to 3 offspring every single year from after it reaches 1 year of maturity through the day that it dies. And one male can fertilize as many female deer as it can win in a rut each year. So the population will continue to grow no matter what we do. And if we are going to engage in population management, it needs to be a long-term commitment from the city. And one concern the commission has had is that we have not seen a single community other than Meridian Township in Michigan that has continued a population management program past 4 or 5 years. Even Ann Arbor, which had one of the best programs out there, I really consider it the gold star, stopped its program after 5 years. And there's been not a peep as to whether they're ever going to restart it. So part of that is that it's controversial, and part of that's that it spends money. But this is something you would need to commit to long-term if you're going to do it. It's going to probably cost more in the first year than it would in years subsequent, and then after that it's going to be an annual expense to deal with the animals. If the city does decide to go forward with population management, though, there were a few things the commission was pretty unanimous on. One is that the commission certainly prefers sharpshooters over a unmanaged hunt or using local residents for hunting. There were several reasons for this. One was just general safety and liability concerns. Two was that there were several people on the commission that viewed the use of a firearm to dispatch a deer as a more humane way of killing an animal than bow hunting. And then there was also just general ideas about efficiency as well, given that the cities we've seen that have done bow hunts, it just normally hasn't been enough to have a meaningful impact on the population. If the commission wasn't really opposed to the non-lethal techniques, other than that they're expensive and that the chemical contraceptions have a lot of side effects to them, so as far as the deer not being edible anymore. So if you were to go that option, we'd recommend the sterilization option, assuming you can get permits for it from DNR still. And then we also had recommended that so that you actually have a firm estimate of costs, that if you're really thinking about doing this before you commit to it fully, that you actually authorize getting proposals from some contractors if you're looking at sterilization or sharpshooting, because the only thing we can do at this point is provide a general cost estimate based on the per animal costs that are reported, and then kind of estimating the number of animals that might need to be removed based on what we've seen in other communities with similar populations and similar land masses. But none of the contractors we talked to could give us a firm estimate on what it's going to cost until they actually come out, look at the numbers, write up a plan, and tell you how many animals to remove. And then that animal goal is kind of somewhat up to the city too to set based on what our goals are. So we would recommend getting formal proposals so you can really see the hard numbers before committing to it on a long-term basis, but we would recommend that if you're going to make it a long-term commitment. So don't just make this a 1 or 2 year commitment, but make it at least a 4 or 5 year commitment with the idea that you're going to probably have to continue that if you want to keep the population numbers under control. We really would like the city to be able to work with our neighbors too. I know there's a lot of interest in that. The one downside to that is that with the neighboring communities that have even responded to us, it sounds like most are in a wait and see type of perspective right now. Our neighbors in Farmington Hill have been talking about this a bit informally for a while. They've had some town halls, but there is no indication that there's any intent to put this on the ballot or make a decision about whether to call or not call deer in Farmington Hills right now. We haven't heard back from a lot of our other neighboring communities. Rochester Hill did one call and did it probably the worst way you could by not communicating with residents at all, and they've kind of just done nothing with the issue since then for several years now. So we would really love to work with the rest of the community in this area, but we don't think Southfield should take a wait and see approach and wait in perpetuity for everyone else to get on board. Everyone's waiting for someone to make the first action here, so if Southfield's going to continue being a leader on this, it might as well be us. And we have basically a similar position about the regional coalition that's been formed in Oakland County and with some of the SIMCOG communities. We'd really love to see that work get off the ground and be successful. It would be great to have states and counties having a more active role in this, because it really shouldn't be a local problem. But that effort is so early, in its infancy, that there's just no timeline on when and if anything's going to come of it, or how it would be paid for, or what it would look like. So it could be several years before that regional coalition really has anything for solutions. So if this is something you want to act on now, I don't see any reason why you need to wait for the regional coalition. And that's it for our formal presentation. So I'm happy to field any questions you have. I know there's a lot of information in there. Happy to answer questions outside the meeting too. So.
All right, Councilman Cruz?
I almost forgot what I was going to ask now. Thank you for your presentation, though. I mean, it's extremely thorough, and got a lot of good information on it. I just only had a simple question or two. One was on how you can tell whether or not you are counting the same deer. Are you tagging them when we do that kind of stuff? So we know that we're not just taking numbers by looking at the same group of deer running around here everywhere.
Yeah, there's no way to be 100% certain. I haven't participated in one of the aerial surveys, but I did talk with the people who did, and basically what they do is they go up in a helicopter one day during the year, so you don't have as much of a risk of miscounting there. And what you do is you look for tracks, and you follow the tracks to the animals, and they count as many as they can spot. So there's always room for human error, miscounting, double counting. I wouldn't rely on those survey numbers as being the end-all, be-all on it, but the wildlife biologists from DNR and the one from MSU that we talked to said that generally those surveys tend to be an undercount rather than an overcount.
Okay. And these are these animals edible to the people?
Yeah, deer are, they're considered a wild resource that people can harvest. Lots of people hunt in Michigan. I think over 1 million deer were taken in Michigan just this last hunting season. So there's plenty of people that still eat them, just you don't generally harvest them in Southfield right now. There's lots of areas you can hunt in Oakland County, but Southfield isn't one of them right now.
Yeah, because I thought I did hear some other cities that were using it for, for people to eat, for homeless shelters and things of that nature or something like that.
Yeah,
It's a positive.
And Councilman, that's why part of the advisory ballot question was to recommend donating the meat. If we did move forward with the call, our hope would be that the city would work with a group called Sportsmen Against Hunger, which is based up in Macomb County, but they're a 501c3 that can use their fundraising money to offset all of the processing costs for processing the deer and getting the meat packaged, and then they help distribute it to places like homeless shelters. I think the juvenile hall takes some of it. They work with a lot of different organizations throughout the county to get the food out. So.
Okay. And last question sounds like the only option that's not lethal is the sterilization. Is that correct?
It would be, the only active option would be the sterilization or chemical contraception. You always have the option of doing what the city's been doing now, which is to not actively manage the population.
That too, yeah.
So, which is in the world of wildlife management, the decision not to actively manage is an action in terms of wildlife management. You're just kind of letting the ecosystem as it is and as it's modified by people take its course and find out where the balance comes down.
Okay. All right, and thank you for all the work you guys put into this, so appreciate it. I'm all done.
Thank you. Councilman Hoag?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of questions, I think. When you gave the results from the attitudes of the residents,
Yes.
that was just based upon 226 respondents.
Correct, yes.
What's your feedback, though, when you think about our overall population? Because the results are high based upon just 226 respondents.
Yeah, so those results, we don't really have a way to do much with it beyond just rely on what we have and the qualifications that are there. It was a voluntary survey, so we promoted it through the city's newsletter and its website. People participated as they wanted. We don't know much about the people who did participate beyond some background demographic information that we had pulled from that. There was a decent distribution across residents. I can tell you that the two demographics I remember sticking out was that people who chose to answer the survey tended to be a bit older, so most were over the age of 40, and they tended to be homeowners as well. It was mostly
My concern
homeowners.
is making a decision based upon a very small population that responded, because that could just mean that very small population is the only one that really is concerned overall. But just wanted to know what was your feedback on that. My next question is, of those cities, Meridian Township, Ann Arbor, and East Lansing, what kind of backlash, if any, did they get from animal rights groups, things like that?
So I believe the only one that faced legal challenges was Ann Arbor, and I know the city was sued. I know the suit ended up getting dismissed. I don't know any more about the details of that lawsuit, and the program did move forward. In East Lansing, they had kind of pumped the brakes for a couple years, did some more communications, and there was a little bit of threat of a lawsuit, as well as some general protesting from some animal rights groups, but ultimately no one filed suit in East Lansing, and the call went forward without a hitch during its first year. And then Meridian Township, actually, I mean, there was some general disagreement at some council meetings, but they never had any protests or lawsuits or anything like that. Some of that could be demographic differences. You know, it's a bit more of a rural township. But yeah, there was some pushback. And one other thing that was reported to us from Ann Arbor was that while during the years they were doing the program, there were a few instances of disorderly conduct with people damaging city property or city equipment that was involved in the deer cull. So I think some feed bins got tipped over or contaminated, things like that. So
Do we know why Ann Arbor opted out of the program now?
nobody has told me. It was ultimately up to the Ann Arbor City Council whether to renew the program, and it has not elected to do so, but I haven't received any other information about that.
And my last question or comment, maybe a question, it's on your recommendations. And when one of them is to hire a full-time staff person, and when you list what tasks they could complete, it says research and apply for grants. But then on the next page, on C, it says there's few, if any, grants available.
Right, so there are grants lots of grants available for habitat management and habitat restoration projects. So potentially a staff person could look into programs and projects the city could engage in other than population control that we could potentially find other funding sources for. So, for example, Michigan DNR has several programs that you can apply to annually for, say, improving wild game habitat on your property. Public landowners and private landowners can apply for them. Those are really more focused at the habitat management side of things. Other grants might be, though, like wetland restoration grants, things like that. So these are types of programs that are kind of wildlife adjacent in that they deal with the habitat that the animals live in but aren't directly connected to the animals themselves, and that you're not actively managing the animals. But our thought was that someone with some expertise in this might know better where to look for the money, what kinds of programs are available, and could be able to work with other departments to find opportunities where we might be able to get some funding. But I don't think any of that would be for managing the deer itself, because I just haven't seen anything that's out there where you can apply for money to pay for deer management unless you've got a disease and the animals need to be removed for that reason.
And then this is the last question. Contraceptive method, there isn't a freeze on that by the state, just if it's chemical.
There's not currently a freeze. I believe the law the legislature enacted in response to Ann Arbor sunsetted in 2019, and it has not been reenacted. So currently there is no freeze in place. As far as the chemical contraceptives go, we had Chad Stewart out here in the town hall back in September. He said of the 3 chemicals that are on the market, I think he said 1 had been approved for use in Michigan. And that would be the only one that's an option. And then the surgical sterilization is separate, so different permit, but you don't need chemicals for that. But our concern with the chemical contraception was that it does render the animal inedible. So, you know, for like, say, you sterilized a buck or something and they leave the city limits, no one can now harvest that animal. And then the other concern was that the treatment has to be reapplied every couple of years too. So when we compared that to the surgical sterilization, we thought surgical sterilization would be a better long-term option.
Thank you. That's all.
All right, Councilwoman Banks?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Schaefer and the Wildlife Commission for studying and presenting this report to us. I think we all can agree they've done an excellent job. Mr. Schaefer came before the Neighborhood Services Committee meeting and provided us with the same presentation. And there's just a few things that I don't know if we can make a decision tonight, but there's a few areas I think we can maybe consider, and bring it back before council. First of all, we have to remember this was on the November 2022 ballot. And to refresh everyone's memory, we asked the public, do you support the reduction of the deer herd in the city of Southfield by humane lethal means with the intent to engage local partners and ensure that donation of meat deemed safe and where feasible is made to local food banks and similar organizations? 32,259 people voted. Of the 32,259 people, 19,909 voted yes, and 12,350 people voted no. So to me, this is an indication we need to do something, at least start something. I mean, the people have spoken. We didn't know what to do. We took it to the people, and it passed. I would like council to consider, first of all, putting the information that Mr. Schaefer suggested on our website. I know we discussed it at the Neighborhood Services meeting. I personally think it's an easy solution. If you go to the 3 communities websites that he provided here, I don't know if we can do a cut and paste, if that's legal or not legal, but it was put together very well. And if you Google, if you search on our website for deer, we presently don't have anything. And as Mr. Schaefer said, I also thought something was going to be put on our website. So I guess I'd like to ask council, within the next 30 days, do you agree that something like this should be put on our website? And it shouldn't take that much time because the information is already out there. Number 2, I think it's important that we start something and then long-term try to work with Oakland County, because this is not just a Southfield problem, it's a county problem. And after talking to a lot of people, I think people just don't know, where do I start, where do I begin? And we can be the leaders in this. While there's a lot of people that love the deer, there's also a lot of people that do not like the deer. But maybe we can start with a program, and I believe you said in January or February, the state allows a certain group of people to come out and hunt the deer, and there's different rules and regulations regarding it. It has to be in an open area, example, like Plum Hollow. That's a big open area for people to hunt the deer at that time, and then they can take the meat, process the meat, and then give it to those who are in need of the venison. Venison is very delicious. If you've never had it before, it's like beef or steak. And I Googled this morning, there's, I think, 4 processing areas not too far from here. 2 are in, I believe it was Eastern Market, and I think one was in Dearborn, that do deal with deer. You cannot just take it to a regular butcher. There's got to be special machines, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'd like for council to consider something like that. And then the third thing, I know Mr. Schaefer talked about hiring a person to oversee this program, and I believe it was mentioned at the Neighborhood Services Committee, I'm not sure if it was by Mr. Zorn or someone else on his team, that we presently have an animal warden. And maybe this could also be a responsibility, at least a start. We can add that to the animal warden's duties, you know, and if anything is emailed to him, he then can forward it to Mr. Schaefer and/or his team, or however, you know, we decide. So those are just some suggestions that, you know, I would like council to think about, or I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I would just hate for this report to get lost on a bookshelf somewhere. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't see a reason why we can't place information about the Wildlife Commission or some of the other population management or other ideas on the website. I'm sure we can talk to our community relations director and figure out a way to have a subpage somewhere if it's not there already. I thought we did have a subpage, but I could be wrong.
No, we don't.
Sir, there, Council President, there is a subpage for the commission, just the only things that have been put up there are a link to our minutes and then the no-feed ordinance. So nothing else has been uploaded to the subpage.
Okay, so you do have I thought you had a subpage, but we can definitely make it more, we could work to make it more robust as needed. So hopefully that's at least one step in the right direction. Councilman Brightwell?
David, I really appreciate your efforts in this area, in your commission. I attended your town hall last year, I think it was October. And you've done this is very professional and work that gives us something that we can use and something we can use to make a decision with. And I think one of the driving forces would be that election that we had last year, and I asked our city clerk this morning to give us this results, and the fact that 62% of the people approve of a calling and this statement, that says a lot. And I think from a community standpoint, you get 62% of the population being affirmative. That is a note to anyone who's in charge. This is the direction that we want to go from a community standpoint. What is a question I have. What was the per case? I think I had 400 and 300 per animal, the cost that you initially gave us?
For doing a traditional call, so like using sharpshooters, that tends to be $450 to $750 is what White Buffalo was estimating. So the USDA sharpshooters are probably a little bit cheaper based on what I saw from East Lansing's numbers. I think they were costing around $90 to $100 per animal is what they ended up spending at the end of the day. But unlike White Buffalo, the USDA doesn't, produce a full report for you and do as much of the administration. So that's probably some of the cost difference there.
Okay. So once you go through the calling, and what is nature always comes back. So when, okay, we take out 80, 100 or whatever, when under the natural process, when will that number go back up? It will get back to the equilibrium.
So and this is me estimating a little bit here, based on the presentation Chad Stewart did last year, it sounded like it would probably be a 2 to 4 year period to recover. Most communities when they remove, they've normally been pulling out 80 to 100 animals per year, and he estimated that if you give them, 3 or 4 years, those numbers would be pretty close to where they were before.
Sure.
Assuming nothing else changes. I mean, that's assuming animals are still reproducing, they're coming in, they're not leaving as much, so, there's a lot of uncertainties there. But
Sure, I got it. We did it. So that leads to the fact that this should be, if we are serious about this and we want to constantly have our ear to the ground with respect to what our citizens desire, this is something that we should have a continuous management and a continuous But, you know, and, well, I guess continues from a standpoint of providing a management position. Like now we have a animal warden, so there's nothing wrong with having a management position to look at wildlife management, something of that nature. That's my thinking, because if we just do it and forget about it, you know, within a year, 2 to 3 years, to be right back to where it was. So it should be something to be consistently maintained.
Yeah, I mean, it helps to have someone that maintains the institutional knowledge. And this is one thing that Meridian Township did that I think probably is why their program has worked so well, is they had someone in their Parks Department that it wasn't her job when the city decided to do deer, but it became her job. And now that they've been doing it for quite a few years, it's about 30% of her job is managing and administering their deer program in addition to everything else she does for her department. So.
Right. I understand that. And another item that there was a TV program, and I had a citizen sent me a video of the TV program that I guess was on Channel 4, and it indicated that there was I mean, you might have mentioned this in your, and I went and took a look at it, and I downloaded the transcript. Is there an Urban Deer Coalition? Did you take a look at it? That's something that we need to be aware of.
I mean, there's an urban coalition among some of the communities here in Oakland County. That might be what they were talking about, that formed fairly recently. They, within the last year and a half, and that coalition's kind of in the meeting stage right now. They did put out a multi-county survey in the last 6 months that we saw some preview results from, which largely mirrored our community. But those results haven't been publicly released yet, as far as I know. So.
Okay. It's indicated that the program is coming back. It was a council meeting in Livonia, and that was where the TV was there. What do you know of any funds that, and then obviously this would be associated with someone in that position, and or if someone on the staff to see whether or not there are any funds that the state is given to cities that actually go forward with calling and.
The only times I heard of the state providing money for this was in areas where there was reported cases of chronic wasting disease, which is very similar to mad cow in terms of the type of disease it is, but it appears in deer and elk and things like that. And with that, the state did put some money into removal because they needed to basically remove the entire population in that area to control the disease. But short of there being an emergency, like a potentially zoogotic disease that can jump from animals to humans, DNR's approach to wildlife like deer has generally been a hunt at sustainable levels type approach. It's kind of core to their mission statement, and somewhat contradictorily, even though deer are considered a public resource that the state manages for the people, the state has been pretty hands-off when it comes to local management of those animals.
Okay. And you've indicated, I think I picked up that in Southfield, those would be like pockets. There are pockets of the disturbances with respect to the deer. So from a culling standpoint, how would that happen if we, obviously, there are pockets, and some of those pockets are dense where, you know, it's a public safety kind of thing. So, and we don't have to get into the scientific of you know, this is how best to do it, but I'm just, in my mind, indicated that we have pockets and we might have to avoid a pocket.
Yes, so this is, I mean, this is one of the challenges of designing a cull once you actually approve one, and it's something your contractors could work with you with. But my understanding of how White Buffalo figured it out with communities that have hired it is that they send someone out, they look at a map, they look at where they think the deer are most densely located, and then they, you know, kind of look at what public spaces, large open spaces they have, do a drive around and kind of survey it. So, you know, if I'm thinking of Southfield, what I would envision is that the contractor would probably want to see the map, the distribution maps we have. They might make a general estimate of, all right, well, some of them are over here in the 9 Mile area. Maybe we drive them out to Carpenter Lake. Carpenter Lake could be a good spot, potentially. Maybe Bovardic Woods off of 9 Mile is a good spot, or maybe Plum Hollow Golf Course is a good spot. But basically what they would be doing is looking for areas where we think there's going to be a higher concentration of animals and having those designated as your sites for the cull. And then the contractors will generally use bait for a few days or a week or two ahead of time to try and make that site even more attractive to the animals ahead of the cull. And so they'd lay out like apples or something for a week or two to start attracting the animals there more.
All right. Okay, I have one or two more questions. And I recall when I kind of first got on council, all this popped up. And I knew that there was contraceptive with respect to, how best to control this. But New York State, I think they tried that, and it was a failure. It was not productive enough for them, so they clearly wouldn't do that again. But if we get into the calling, and I think you indicated that the sharpshooter is probably the best approach as opposed to bow and arrow, which is not, that has its issues too. Would this be something that would have to be done every year to, let's say, maintain a certain level? Because like you said, if we do that for 2 years, it'd be right back to where it was. But it would have something that needs to be done on a regular basis.
Yeah, so the recommendations generally are is that during your first 3 to 5 year period, you do it every year. And then you could make a decision from there whether to maybe take an off year or 2 off years. And obviously that's going to have an impact on your population. Some of that becomes kind of a local cost benefit analysis at that point. But to really see whether your program's effective, you need to have probably a minimum of 3 seasons. And a lot of the contractors and reports we read recommended doing 5 seasons and then reevaluating from there. So.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you very much. And I think you guys are really doing a good job. I appreciate reading your reports, and I appreciated last year attending the town hall that you had. It was very informative. With the room was packed. Obviously that was a sign that this is an issue that is important to top of mind for a lot of citizens here, and the election indicated the same thing. So I think, well, you guys are doing a bang-up job, a good job, and you're giving us something that we can use. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Frazier?
Yes, thank you. That was a great report. And I heard it in the Neighborhood Services meeting, but it's still a great report here again tonight. One of the things that I think is that, and you mentioned in your report, that we have to have a goal of what we're trying to accomplish, so we know how successful we're going to be when it's all over, when we spent the money. But does anybody from the DNR know how far a deer will travel from one place to another? And the reason I ask that question is, I think probably we're on the tail end of a bigger problem, and that is the natural habitat for the deer is going away. People that have farms that are tired of farming, they don't want to farm anymore. They sell their farms to a developer puts up houses. The deer have no place to go there, so they travel someplace else. So do they have any idea about how far a deer will travel?
Yeah, I mean, there's studies out there and averages. For the female deers, the does, it tended to be 1 to 2 mile radius is kind of their core area. Obviously, they can travel further than that, but that's where they tend to stick around, especially when they have their fawns with them. The bucks travel a lot. I skimmed through a few different studies and reports on them. Some said 5 miles in a day. One report noted a buck they tracked like 20 or 30 miles over a week during the mating season. So The bucks travel very far, and one of the challenges with that is that because there's no limit on the number of females a buck can impregnate, you can have one very dominant male that can take care of an entire city, basically, and and then pop over to the next city with the next one. So yeah, they do travel. It tends to be the bucks that travel the furthest, but even the females travel a couple miles.
Okay. Councilwoman Banks mentioned that venison is delicious. It all depends on who you are. If you get a deer that's been shot in the Upper Peninsula, they're very gamey because their food is pine trees and all. Down here, they probably taste more like beef because they're eating corn. They may taste a lot like hostas and daisies, but because that's what they're eating down here.
Plenty of junk food in our gardens for them.
Yeah, but if we have sharpshooters or white buffalo or whatever, who is responsible for taking care of the carcass after the deer is shot?
Yeah, so there's two ways it can be dealt with. One, if you use someone like White Buffalo, you can pay them to handle all of it. And it's an extra fee on top of their base rate, but it's 100 to 150 animals, and they will take care of everything with dealing with the animal. For the other communities, they worked with Sportsmen Against Hunger. I never got a straight answer on whether that meant Sportsmen sent a truck out and actually hauled the deers to their location directly, or if they had to find a way to get the deer to Sportsmen Against Hunger. But once the deer were in possession of Sportsmen Against Hunger, they handled everything from there. Getting it to the proper butcher and then getting it packaged and then getting the meat distributed. So that would be a logistical thing that would need to be hammered out, definitely.
Yeah, but it also, we need to know if it's going to be an additional cost to whatever the contract is with whoever's going to cull the deer.
Right, and that's why the hope would be is that we could work with Sportsmen, because that's probably the best way to offset it. A lot of communities in this area have taken advantage of it. So I spoke with the CEO of Sportsmen about a year and a half ago, and he said that their organization can cover pretty much all of the expenses. I did not ask him specifically about hauling the animals away from our site, so maybe that wasn't included in his estimate, but I took what he was saying to at least include everything from when the animal enters the butcher's door to when the meat goes out. So,
yeah, and somebody's got to pay for the butchering too. So if the Sportsmen Against Hunger absorb that cost, that's fine. But
yeah.
if it falls back on us, that yeah, we'll take the deer, but you got to pay for the butchering, and we'll find some place to take the processed meat.
Right, we would definitely need to hammer that out, because I mean, if it is assuming on a low end, $100 per animal, if we remove 100 animals, that's an extra $10,000. So it's,
Right.
So it is, it is not an insignificant sum if we've got to shoulder that too.
Yeah, I'm trying to help us think our way all the way through it, so we don't get a surprise, oh, here's a cost that we hadn't thought about.
Which is part of the reason why, Councilman Frazier, we really think it would be a good idea to get a formal proposal or estimate from, say, someone like White Buffalo before the council makes a final decision, because some of these variable costs aren't going to really be able to be hammered out until you've got something on the page. And so we didn't want to put, a hard, fast number on anything that we can't stick you to. But if you had them come out and do a formal proposal, I'm sure they'd be able to hammer out those details for you.
Okay, and I think it's important that we sit down with our neighbors and talk with them about the process that we're trying to come up with, see if we can encourage them to have a program too. If the does go from 1 to 3 miles and the bucks travel up to 30 miles over a period of time, if we're culling deer here, they're just moving in from another city that's taking an empty space where we've got good foliage for them to eat. So it needs to be a planned thing. So it's not something that we can jump at right away and see a great success. It's got to be a success for everyone, I think. So I had several other questions, but most of the people have asked pretty much the same kind of questions that I was going to ask, but I needed to know what was going to happen with the carcass and how much extra costs we're going to absorb or pass on to someone else if that's possible.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Taylor?
Thank you. I just want to concur with the rest of council. This was a great presentation, lots and lots of information. I do also agree that we should have this information on our website, not just for us, but for our residents and those that are interested in this. So I would agree with our neighborhood services, since they've had the presentation. Your recommendations, I would definitely agree with. So thank you for that, and thank you for having Mr. Schaefer present to us tonight. I really appreciate this and enjoyed the information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I too just want to thank you and the rest of your commission. I know you noted only one person has ever come to one of your meetings, but it's still important work that you're doing. And hopefully the overall city, all the residents and businesses will eventually see the fruits of your labor once we figure out how to move forward and take care of some of these issues that are present in our city. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. And I'm sure if we have additional comments or questions, we will reach out.
Yep, happy to help however we can.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President?
Yes.
If this is appropriate, I move that we receive and file the annual report.
Support.
It has been moved by Councilwoman Hoag, supported by Councilwoman Taylor, to receive and file the 2023 Wildlife Commission Annual Report. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have 2 ordinances to enact.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that we enact ordinance number 1772, the amendment to Title IX for police regulations, public peace and welfare, section 9.141, resisting or obstructing officer in discharge of his duty of the city code.
Support.
It has been moved by Councilwoman Taylor, supported by Councilman Brightwell, to enact ordinance number 1772, amendment to Title IX, Police Regulations, Chapter 9, Public Peace and Welfare, Section 9.141, resisting or obstructing an officer in discharge of his duty to the city of code. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that we enact ordinance number 1773, proposed ordinance amendment, in my PC, just vacant property registration.
Support.
It has been moved by Councilman Brightwell, supported by Councilwoman Hoag, to enact ordinance number 1773, ordinance amendment for vacant property registration. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have agenda items for discussion and our action. The first is to approve a joint resolution in honor of Barbara Talley that will be presented next week. Any questions?
Yeah, you've all signed it. We will present it at the Barbara Talley tribute on the 26th. The reason it's here tonight is so I can get it framed tomorrow. So thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move to approve the joint resolution in honor of Barbara Talley.
Support.
It has been moved by Councilman Cruz, supported by Councilwoman Banks, to approve the joint resolution in honor of Barbara Talley. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have the approval of the interagency agreement with Southeast Michigan Council of Governments for an EPA grant for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative.
Good evening, council members and mayor. So I'm here I'm Brandy Solacek, the city's stormwater manager, and I'm here to ask for approval to enter into an interagency agreement with Southeastern Michigan Council of Governments, also known as SUMCOG for short, for a green infrastructure grant that they received for Barrobeck Woods Park. For those listening in, Barrobeck is located on the southwest corner of Evergreen and 9 Mile Roads. So SUMCOG received a $1 million grant to implement green infrastructure projects throughout the region. This was a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant funded through the US EPA to implement green infrastructure projects. And green infrastructure are items such as bioswales, rain gardens, and design natural areas, which provide significant benefits for stormwater management, including reducing stormwater runoff into our stormwater system and minimizing flooding and protecting water quality. So 12 projects were funded through this award through SEMCOG, and one was the Barrovac Woods Park, which was in the amount of $95,000. The funding for that will allow an installation of a large-scale bioswale rain garden on the southwest corner of the park, where we have significant flooding when it rains. So this will reduce flooding in that area and also capture stormwater before it enters the storm drain. Also, it will reduce some of the flooding on the trails as well as along Prescott there as well. And so this, the funds for, actually there's no match for this project, and the funds have already been budgeted in fiscal year 23-24 stormwater management budget. So this is a good addition to several other improvements that are going on along the 9 Mile corridor, including pedestrian walkway improvements and trail improvements, as well as invasive species management in that park, which I think Mr. Schaefer was kind of alluding to. So we are trying to get some of these habitat projects in place, you know, where we can, working with Parks and Recreation. So that, and also restroom improvements to that area. And I think that is the gist of the project. If anyone has any other questions?
Council, any questions? Councilman Frazier?
Yeah, the flooding. How bad is the flooding?
So the flooding was really bad in the past, and they did put a, DPW and engineering put in a storm drain system where at the end of Prescott to the south end where the trail connects to the neighborhood. So we still do see flooding, but the storm drain there captures a lot of the backyard flooding from the neighborhood. But the grant itself is supposed to reduce runoff into a storm system, just to protect water quality and protect our water resources. So we chose this area because we want to capture the runoff before it actually gets to the storm system. The storm drain itself obviously is reducing the flooding in general, but we're trying to protect water resources as well. So the bioswale rain garden will be near the storm drain that was put there. But we have had, you know, to close that road a few times because of significant flooding happening there.
Okay, and in the woods itself, what kind of a device or thing has to be constructed to capture the water? So, I mean, I thought trees were the ones that...
Right, and we do have a lot of trees there, but there's a lot of standing water because there's a lot of invasive plants and invasive, you know, trees that are growing there. So this project would remove a lot of those and install, you know, compost and sand and almost like a big ditch line that would capture some of the runoff and let it soak into the ground. And so the project has not been designed. The grant also incorporates the design piece of it. So we have a sort of a conceptual design, but it would need to be, you know, designed by some of our professional engineers to have the exact outcome of what it will look like.
Would they be hydrologists or something so they could kind of guess about how much water you're going to capture?
Right.
So it doesn't go into the storm drain?
Correct. So we'll be doing some like soil borings to check out what the soils are like and looking at the topography within the park and then design it based on that. We have some initial, you know, initial design ideas, but it still needs to have a full design associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's it.
Any other questions, council?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move the approval of the interagency agreement with the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments as presented here tonight.
Support.
It has been moved by Councilwoman Taylor, supported by Councilwoman Hoag, for the approval of the interagency agreement with SEMCOG as presented. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval to renew the lobbyist contract with Governmental Consultant Services. To the council, I did have some emails this morning as the mayor with our lobbyist, Bill Zagman. He was going to be here, but unfortunately, he had some issues to deal with, lobbying issues. But I did ask that he come to a meeting in the future to address the council and give us an update on things going on. But, Mr. Zorn, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Mr. President. We're asking to extend their contract for the additional 3 years. The first year will be the current rate, and then years 2 and 3, the rate will go up to $48,875. And I'm asking council to approve that. I think many of you are aware of, some of the things we've been working on, different projects and securing funding. I think last year we had a number of big successes. I mean, our lobbyist was critical in what we obtained and the commitment we obtained from the state of Michigan regarding the Northland project and roads like Denso Drive for $3 million and different grants that we're asking for. And then day-to-day troubleshooting with state agencies.
Any questions? Councilwoman Banks?
Yes, now that COVID is hopefully behind us, I'd like for council to consider that maybe once every 4 months, our consultant comes down and meets with council as a whole, and any questions we may have, at least we can get a response as a whole. We used to do this years ago, and I personally found it very beneficial. And, unfortunately, we've, had 3 years where, we were either in Zoom meetings, and so I don't know if council agrees or disagrees, but it would be nice, like I said, maybe once every 4 months to have our consultant come down and in an informal session, or it can be here, we can ask questions and they can respond back.
Absolutely. All right, Councilman Frazier?
Yeah, and this is to Mr. Zorn. Do we have any policy on contractors that we have that we've used on a long-term basis that every once in a while we, I don't know, I don't want to say put them out for bid because they're doing a good job, but compare with other contractors to find out if we're overpaying, underpaying, or whatever?
Well, we're constantly looking at results. I mean, the charter gives us some latitude on professional services. But other, our engineering work, we go out to bid every few years. We usually write 3-year contracts. Our audit, Plant Moran's another one. At the next week's meeting, we'll be bringing an item forward. But, a lot of them are relationships. We benchmark where we are with other costs. At one point, they were bid, and I could tell you a number of years we held GCSI flat in their fee. And this year, I did ask them to hold a 1 year, and then the next years 2 and 3 went up. So we're constantly shopping and looking what other groups are charging and looking at cities our size. I will tell you the last city I was in 2008, I was paying more than this annually. I was at $54,000 a year. So
I'm not even suggesting, or a hint of a suggestion, that we're not getting our money's worth. It's just that we have OHM, Holbrook, and Clark, and all, that we've used for so long that it's almost like it's just a guaranteed almost. But that's the only reason I brought it up. And I think we're getting a good job from everyone that we have. But just as a comparison, to make ourselves comfortable.
Sure.
That's it.
Thank you. Councilman Brightwell?
I would just indicate that I'm supportive of Mrs. Banks' suggested we have the lobbyists come in periodically just to make a presentation. But also, I'm supportive of this simply because over my 8 years of being on council, I have interacted with this lobbyist firm off and on based on a couple of the little projects that I have, and they just give us, and I would obviously give us insight of what's, in essence, what's going on in Lansing with respect to the issue I might have been dealing with. So I'm supportive of this item.
Okay. Council, any other questions?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'd like to move approval to renew lobbyist contract with Governmental Consultant Services Incorporated.
Support.
Everyone's supportive. It was moved by Councilman Cruz, supported by Councilman Taylor to approve the renewal of the lobbyist contract with Governmental Consultant Services as presented. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. President, if I just wanted to dovetail on Mr. Frazier's statement. I think that's a very good idea that we do something like that to the people that we contract with, to have them come before us. I mean, they don't have to come like every month or two or nothing, but, you know, maybe every 6 month kind of update on what they've been doing for the city, you know, just so we can know what's being done. I also think it would be helpful for us in our efforts for minority contracts and, or should I say, community benefits agreements, so we can see who is actually doing the work too, because then maybe that might be more helpful for us to, as we move forward. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now up to the council portion. We will start with Councilman Frazier.
I do have a question, and that is, again, it goes to Mr. Zorn, City Administrator. I'm a little concerned about our Community Block Grant Fund. And I know a number of years ago, we used to bring people in that wanted money from the block grant program, and they made their pitch, and the council was involved in hearing the pitch and helping make a decision. Now, I'll admit, I haven't been here to all the meetings, and I wasn't here when that was done. But was it done in this session, or was it done with whoever's managing the block grant? Because I have a question about the $2,000 that we spent on Haven.
We did that back, I believe, May 1st. We conducted the public hearing, and the groups seeking for money have a right to come in. We also go through an extensive public notification process where it's posted for 30 days. And you know, I think part of it is the dollars have shrunk, and I believe only 15% of your funds can go for public services, so that reduces the amount. And we've always put an emphasis on a larger portion of our dollars not going towards projects, but by projects I mean traditional capital projects, but on those activities that will help people stay in their home. The chore program probably being one of the largest. So, I mean, but I know years ago we would have, when I first started here, we'd have different agencies come in and make their pitch, Rebuild Together. I will share with you just today, Rebuild Together had an event at Barbaric Park. They had told that they were supposed to have over 60 volunteers over a 2-day period. And they worked on a project with Parks and Rec on spreading wood chips and that. And I hope that's answering your question.
Yeah, well, here's what kind of bothered me. I think we ought to do the best that we can for the citizens of the city of Southfield. And we're handicapped by the limitations of the money that we have to spend. So we have to be very judicious in how we portion it. And we first gave $3,000 to Haven. And I think Haven does a wonderful job. But with our limited amount of money that we have seniors that have some needs, and I felt that $2,000 additional that went to Haven, we gave them $3,000 in the beginning, which, you know, we don't want to say, we want you to do things for us and we don't want to pay for it. So with the amount of money that we had to spend, we did that. I went home and looked up their 990 and in their unrestricted, in Haven's unrestricted funds, they had $1,800,000 grant from the government. So the other $2,000 we gave them is like pocket change. But it could make a lot of difference between a senior that could get their lawns mowed or something. So when we make these decisions, I would hope that we make them knowing that we're spending our money to get the best value for the citizens of Southfield. So that's the only point I'm trying to make. So. Okay?
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I just add to that?
Sure.
That's my sermon for tonight.
Mr. Fraser, I totally agree with you. They do great stuff, and their annual report lists all of these people that they serve all over Oakland County, but their 2021 budget revenue was $5.4 million, including the 1.8 from the federal government.
Yeah, that's why I say that I think we ought to make sure that the citizens of Southfield that are really wanting, that need and needy, that we also take care of them.
And I think, I just want to add, it was $4,000 that we gave them this year, not.
Pardon?
We gave them $4,000 this year.
No, 5.
5? Oh.
Yeah, we gave them 3,000 and we added the 2,000 because all of the administration money wasn't spent. You had $2,000 left in the administration because you can only put 15% of the as administrative costs.
Councilman Brightwell?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Mr. Frazier because we were putting out the money last year. That's why I asked for their budget, you know, their whatever. Our little dollars for that organization is just a dip in the bucket, but if we put it into another organization, which our money, that's more impactful than when we give it to someone who's kind of flush with cash. So it's just a process of determining where will our money be most useful and where will it be, we're not slighting anybody, it was just the most usefulness of the dollars that we're presenting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want everybody to know I voted for it too, so.
Yeah, we support it,
too,
yeah.
so.
Thank you. Anything
That's
else?
it.
All right, Councilwoman Banks?
Thank you. The City of Southfield is currently seeking nominations for the 2023 Community Pride Awards. This program recognizes Southfield residents who have gone that extra mile in their beautification efforts. The program also includes businesses in a small category, businesses in the large category, and well-manicured, maintained residential properties. Hard copy forms are available at the city's Neighborhood and Information Center here at City Hall, and there is also a link on the website if you are interested in downloading a form. Also, I think it's Friday, June 23rd. Is that Friday?
Yep.
Okay. The city will be hosting, I believe it's its first Summer in the City concert. It will be here on the municipal campus, and it will be from 7 till 9 o'clock p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Cruz?
I had nothing this evening, thank you.
Councilman Taylor?
Hi. The Finance Committee met last Friday, and I asked the clerk's office if they would please send out the minutes and the notes and the additional paperwork that we received. And I believe it was sent out today. So I was just wanting to ask everybody if they could just check their emails to make sure that they received the additional information from the Finance Committee. And if not, please let me know. We also included the mayor and council on there, so please check and let me know, and we'll get those to you. If you don't have them, we'll get them to you, because there's a lot of good information there that we would like to share with the entire council from there. Also, I went to a COSA meeting, and there was a ton of information, and I don't know, I know that there's a web page for COSA, and a lot of information is there, but I didn't see any of this and I just want to name a few things that maybe seniors should contact. If you are using Amazon Prime, just find out if you are, contact Amazon and see they have a discounted rate for seniors of $6.99 a month. So that struck me because I use Amazon Prime all the time and I pay a whole lot more than that. So that's one of the ones that I'm going to be looking at.
You're not a senior.
I am a senior. But what I was going to ask is that, and I'm going to reach out to our COSA team to see if there's ways for us to put additional information. I have about 3 different pages worth of information that COSA has for our seniors that would help us in our everyday life. So you will probably see more of that on the website under COSA. And that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Does COSA work with our senior, it's part of senior services, so that would,
And they have a webpage, that's what I'm just saying.
And they could probably work with the Parks and Rec, Parks and Rec has their Scribe newsletter as well.
Yep.
So.
And they work very well with Parks and Rec. There is a representative that sits with the COSA on their board. So it's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Brightwell?
For our veterans, back in August of 2022, the U.S. government passed the PACT Act, it's P-A-C-T Act, which gave the survivors of veterans additional benefits, those survivors being a spouse, a child, and or a parent. And the VA is now giving a monthly check to dependents, and it's called the DIC, Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, is a monthly payment to the survivors of the U.S. military service. It's because they assume that the exposure that a veteran might have had in a combat area to toxic waste and or chemicals or environmental issues in the, it could have been Vietnam, it could have been in the Middle East, Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iraq or whatever, either or. So a veteran who has registered with the VA and your primary care doctor with the VA or your primary care person at the VA, ask them that you might be eligible for the DIC, that's Delta India Charlie, compensation. And you can fill out a form. You need to fill out a form just to get it started. I'm just going to tell you what they will tell you to do. Once you are identify that you're a veteran, you gave them enough to authenticate that, you will have to fill out a form, VA 21P, that's 21 Papa, 534E as an echo and Z as in Zulu. So that is an additional benefit that the federal government in August of 2022 gave vets because of the presumptive illnesses that veterans are coming down with. Additional item I want to mention, and I think this was alluded to briefly, but on the 26th of June at 4 p.m. we will be honoring Miss Barbara Talley here in the Southfield City Pavilion. that there's a program which will start at 4 o'clock, and we'll be honoring Ms. Talley for her contribution to the city of Southfield and also to the quality of life here in the state of Michigan. She's a nationally known woman, and so we are definitely honoring her, and she will be given a proclamation and a unique designation here in the city of Southfield. And one additional thing, I attended the Jubilee June 10th function here on the front lawn just this past weekend, and it was just stellar. And I was just impressed with the turnout. I was impressed with the program and the way the city performed in making sure that everyone was comfortable. And along those lines, it came to my attention that the Parks and Rec will be having different things this month and also during the summer. I'm just going to mention a couple, but if you are looking for something to do this summer, please look at the Parks and Rec schedule of events that are displayed on the Southfield website under the Parks and Rec. And just an example, on the June 23rd, I think that was mentioned, we have a function. On July the 7th, there's a function. July the 21st, there's a function, and also July 28th. And so just take a look at those, but those are highlighted. And it goes toward, and then talking to individuals while I was here just this weekend for the Juneteenth function, individuals indicated that they appreciate Southfield because they have so many things to do. And that this goes right along with making sure that the elderly and all our citizens have something to do in the city of Southfield. It's another reason to live in Southfield. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoag?
I don't have anything.
All right, I just wanted to mention 2 items. One is for those who decided to watch the council meeting instead of Jeopardy tonight. Southfield was mentioned. There was a landmark used in a Jeopardy clue this evening, so I'm not going to give out any spoilers. So you have to watch Jeopardy, or hopefully you can find it on, I'm sure it's going to be on the news, because when anything like that exciting happens, they usually have it on the news. But anyway, a landmark in Southfield was mentioned on Jeopardy this evening. Also, I wanted to ask through the administration, I know we, at our last meeting, approved National Garage Sale Weekend. I have been told by several employees in the city that the city should hold its own garage sale. We have a number of items that we don't use that sometimes we put out on the websites to municipal bidding for people to buy municipal items, but I thought maybe we should have a garage sale here at City Hall for items that the city no longer needs and is trying to get rid of anyway. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I thought it'd be a good way to clean out City Hall. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, if that's something that we can look into.
It has been discussed several times, and it certainly is within the realm of options.
Okay.
Doing something in the pavilion and the staging on it presents some challenges, but it can be done.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Mayor?
Well, first of all, Councilman Brightwell, thank you for bringing up Juneteenth. We had a phenomenal day on Saturday, very well attended. We started at 10 a.m. with the Mayor's Walk and went all through the day. And yesterday we had the Juneteenth luncheon with the Chamber of Commerce and the AKA sorority. Number of scholarships were awarded to young people. And we conclude Juneteenth this Wednesday night with a jazz and blues at the library. It's nice to see the Free Press and the News kept running Juneteenth events, and I think we were on a cutting edge as we started a Juneteenth week years ago, and everybody else is catching up. There was a lot going on in a lot of communities. I also want to mention that on Sunday was the 16th annual Southfield Parks and Garden Walk. We were in 4 neighborhoods. The city looked absolutely great. We went through many of the neighborhoods, and the yards are well kept. This year's focus was on ponds, and on Farmbrook, we even had a mermaid show up. One of the residents who agreed to showcase his yard threw in a mermaid as an extra treat for those who were on the garden walk. I do want to mention a couple of other things to the council and treasurer and city clerk. The Local Officers Compensation Commission will be meeting at 2 p.m. on June 29th. You will get notice of this. You do not have to attend. You don't have to do anything. If you want to attend or communicate with the Local Officers Compensation Commission, you can either do so in writing, or you can ask to appear before the body when they meet, again, June 29th. Also want to mention a couple of things that are coming up. We are, the Friends of Southfield Public Arts will be teaming up with Emoji Gallery and you have the card, thank you, at your location. This is another fundraiser to help provide art for 9 Mile Road specifically. We invite you to come out. The gallery is located at 16250 Northland Drive in the Crossroads office building, which is the last building on Northland Drive before you hit 8 Mile Road. And again, the time is 5 to 7:30 p.m. And this is being hosted again by the gallery, Emoji Fine Arts. And then finally, I do quite a bit with the Torch of Wisdom Foundation, the foundation arm of the Southfield chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. And they have asked me to mention that on June 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Torch of Wisdom building on 9 Mile, that's 21819 West 9 Mile, they'll be holding a home buying seminar, demystifying the home buying process. It's a workshop for first-time and seasoned home buyers presented by the Torch of Wisdom Economic Education Steering Committee with a number of panelists, as well as support of Fifth Third Bank in Southfield. This, again, may be instructive, especially at this time where we're in a period of high interest rates for home buyers and still a very tight inventory of housing. So again, June 27th, demystifying the home buying process at the Torch of Wisdom building, 6 to 8 p.m. on 9 Mile and Lasher. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. City Administrator?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Parks and Rec Department has asked that I pass along 2 open houses that they are conducting. The first is Connect With Us, and that is for Wednesday, June 21st, 6 to 7:30 p.m. That's in the Parks and Rec Building, room 115, here on our municipal campus. And the topic is to discuss improvements for the new park, for improvements to the Beechwood Park. Improvements will include a new park entry, trail system, picnic shelters, splash pad, and parking area. This session will provide an overview of planned improvements with an opportunity to learn more about the project. So there are two events. One is on Wednesday, June 21st, 6 to 7:30 p.m. The second is on Thursday, June 22nd, also 6 to 7:30 p.m. in room 115 of the Parks and Rec Building. That process, they are going through their final site plan approval, and they just want to give people an opportunity to better understand the project. That's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
To the city attorney.
I was a little excited there. Good evening, council, mayor. As you know, in the past, the city attorney's office, when there are lawsuits brought in the court system, we do bring it to the council for approval for us to continue to defend this. So I have two that I'm presenting tonight. The first one is Michigan Open Carry versus City of Southfield. And in this particular matter, someone filed a request for some information when the police department did a sale of, well, they did the gun buyback program. And once that request was received, you know, it was processed correctly, but this person isn't happy and they filed a lawsuit. So I'm just asking authority to take whatever action is necessary to defend the city and its agents or employees in this cause of action.
Council, any questions on this item? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that we authorize the city attorney to take whatever actions she deems necessary for the wellness of the city regarding this case of Michigan Open Carry versus the City of Southfield versus.
Support.
It has been moved by Councilwoman Taylor, supported by Councilman Frazier, to approve the city attorney taking whatever action is necessary to defend the city in Michigan Open Carry v. City of Southfield. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. And the last one is Noah Fairchild versus City of Southfield. In this particular matter, there's an allegation that on September 28th of 2021, individual was traveling north on Evergreen just south of Westover Avenue, and they allege that they encountered a hole in the roadway causing them to fall off their electric skateboard on which they were traveling and allegedly sustaining serious bodily injuries as a result of the city's failure to exercise ordinary cautions in the maintenance of this particular street. So once again, I'm asking the council to approve my authority to take whatever action is necessary to defend the city in this matter also.
Mr. President,
Yes.
that we authorize the city attorney to take whatever action necessary to defend the city in the suit Noah Fairchild versus City of Southfield.
Support.
It has been moved by Councilwoman Hoag, supported by Councilwoman Taylor, to approve the city attorney to take whatever action is necessary to defend the city in a lawsuit Noah Fairchild v. City of Southfield. Any further questions?
I do.
Yes.
Isn't it against the law to be on a skateboard in the street?
I'm not sure. I know there's skateboard parks, but I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
All right, any further questions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Hi, I have nothing for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Nothing from our treasurer, planner, assessor, engineer, nothing to schedule. Council, I'll entertain a motion for a recess.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that we recess for 10 minutes and then reconvene in council study.
Support.
It had been moved by Councilwoman Taylor, supported by Councilwoman Banks, that we have a 10-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene in the council study. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.